I was dead for 21 minutes and I saw the rapture. The names of my neighbors who were left behind still haunt me. What Christ showed me about your street will leave you breathless. My name is Cristobal Mendoza Armyto. I am 34 years old, and for more than 3 decades I built my entire life on a lie I believed to be the absolute truth, that God did not exist. But on that day when I had that accident, I could see through the ambulance windows. I saw cars pulling over to let us pass. I saw people on the sidewalks turning to look. I saw my city, Cook Bambber, the city where I was born and raised, as if I were seeing it for the first time. The surrounding mountains, the deep blue sky, the brick buildings, the dusty streets, everything looked different. There was a quality to the light now, an intensity to the colors, that I had never noticed when I was alive. Or perhaps it was that I was seeing with different eyes. We arrived at the hospital, and they rushed me into the emergency room. The doctors were already waiting for the ambulance's call. I recognized the doctor in charge, Dr. Menz, a cardiologist who had treated my father years before. Severe traumatic brain injury, cardiorespiratory arrest, 26 minutes without vital signs, someone was reciting, reading the report. Dr. Menz checked my pupils with a flashlight. They were fixed and dilated. Prepare the defibrillator, he ordered. Let's try one more time. I was still floating near the ceiling of the room, watching the controlled chaos of the medical team working on my lifeless body. They placed the defibrillator paddles on my chest. Clear. The doctor shouted. My body arched with the electric shock. On the monitor, the line remained flat. Again, he ordered. Second shock. Nothing. One more, he insisted, though I could see the doubt in his eyes. Third shock. The line on the monitor remained flat and continuous. That endless sound that signals death. Dr. Menz looked at the clock on the wall. It was 108 a.m. 21 minutes had passed since my heart stopped. Good, time of death, he began. But then something changed. A light began to appear in the upper corner of the emergency room. At first, I thought it was a lamp someone had turned on, but this light was different, warm, golden, alive. Somehow, it grew and expanded, filling the room with a glow that the doctors and nurses didn't seem to be able to see. They continued working on my body, preparing to officially declare my death. Completely oblivious to the light that now flooded the entire room, I, however, couldn't tear my attention away from it. It was magnetic, irresistible. I felt it calling to me wordlessly, inviting me closer. I moved toward the light. It was instinctive, like a child running into its mother's arms. As I approached, the emergency room began to fade. The hospital walls became translucent, then transparent, then vanished completely. The sound of the medical monitors, the doctors' voices, the noises of the hospital, everything gradually faded away, and I stepped into the light. It was like immersing myself in warm water without getting wet, like being embraced by the sun itself without being burned. Every part of my being, of my consciousness, was enveloped by this light that was more than light, that was presence, that was love in tangible form. And then I saw the tunnel. I know it sounds like a cliché, like all those near-death experiences I used to dismiss as the fantasies of dying brains, but it was there, real, solid, somehow impossible. It was a corridor of light stretching infinitely ahead. The walls of the tunnel, if you could even call them walls, seemed to be made of liquid light, flowing and rippling with colors that don't exist in the human visible spectrum. Colors for which we have no names. I was moving through this tunnel at a speed impossible to measure. I was flying, I was being transported. I don't know. I only know that I was moving forward with urgency, with purpose. As I moved forward, I began to hear music. It wasn't music as we know it. It wasn't instruments or human voices. It was as if the universe itself were singing, as if every atom of existence were vibrating in perfect harmony. It was mathematically perfect, which the engineer in me noticed immediately, but it was also deeply emotional in a way that defied all logic. It made me want to cry and laugh at the same time. It was the song your soul has been trying to remember your whole life, but never could. It was the melody of home, of a place you belong, but had forgotten existed. The tunnel began to open, expanding into something vast ahead. The light at the end grew brighter, but it didn't hurt my eyes, which I technically no longer had. In fact, the brighter it became, the more I could see. And what I saw when I emerged from the tunnel left me completely speechless, thoughtless, empty of everything except pure, utter awe. I was standing, or somehow existing, on the edge of something I can only describe as the third heaven. The Apostle Paul had mentioned it in his writings, texts I had ridiculed as primitive mythology. But it was there, it was real, and it was more glorious, more beautiful, more perfect than any human words could capture. Before me stretched a landscape that defied all physics, all geometry, all spatial logic I knew. There were mountains made of crystal that sang when light passed through them. There were rivers of pure light flowing upward, defying gravity. There were structures, buildings, cities perhaps, built of materials that glowed with their own light, impossible architecture that stood without visible support, with proportions that were simultaneously immense and perfectly welcoming. The sky, if there was a sky, was a color between gold and sapphire blue, with something like stars, but pulsing with conscious life. And there were beings, oh God. The beings I saw were tall, imposing, made of light, yet with defined form. They had wings, multiple wings, that moved in patterns that created waves of color in the air. Their faces were beautiful beyond any earthly beauty, yet terrifying in their holiness, their absolute purity. These were angels, beings I had categorized as fantasy, as characters from fairy tales for credulous adults, but here they were, real, powerful, glorious. One of them turned toward me. His eyes were like liquid fire, piercing, seeing not only my presence, but every thought I had had, every action I had taken, every word I had uttered in my 34 years of life. Cristobal Mendoza Armyto, the being said, and his voice was like a chorus of 1,000 voices speaking in perfect unity. He didn't move his lips, he didn't make a sound with his vocal cords. The words simply existed in my consciousness, clear and undeniable. You have been brought here for a divine purpose. I tried to respond, I tried to say something, but I was paralyzed, not by fear, but by a sudden and devastating realization. Everything I had believed was a lie. God existed. Heaven was real. The angels were real, and I, the arrogant atheist who had scoffed at it all, stood amidst the irrefutable evidence of my monumental error. Where is he? I finally managed to ask, though I am not sure if I spoke or merely thought the words. The angel extended his hand, pointing ahead, and there, at the center of it all, at the heart of this impossible reality, I saw a throne. It wasn't a throne of gold or stone. It was a throne of pure authority, of absolute power, of majesty that dwarfed everything else. And seated upon that throne was a being of light so brilliant that I shouldn't have been able to look directly at him, but I could. And when I did, when I saw his face, I knew with absolute certainty who he was. It was Jesus Christ. He was the God I had denied, the Savior I had mocked, the Creator whose existence I had challenged with every fiber of my proud intellect, and his eyes were 29:56 over me. And in those eyes I saw infinite love, and I also saw perfect justice. And I knew, without anyone having to tell me, that my life was about to be judged. Being in the presence of Christ is something for which human language is completely inadequate. For 34 years I had used words with precision, I had written technical reports, I had given presentations full of specialized terminology. But now, before him, every word I knew felt empty, insufficient, like trying to describe the ocean using only a drop of water. He was sitting on that throne of absolute authority. And although the light emanating from him was brighter than 1,000 suns, I could see his form, his face, his features. He was completely human and completely divine at the same time. A paradox that my engineer's mind couldn't resolve, but that my spirit recognized as fundamental truth. The first thing I noticed, What struck me with the force of a hammer against my chest were his hands. They had wounds, circular marks on their palms and wrists, where nails had pierced their flesh 2,000 years ago. Those wounds shone with a light unlike the rest of their being, as if they were the sources of all the light in the universe. Blood, or something like blood, but a deep crimson, flowed from them constantly, but instead of falling, it rose like incense smoke, filling the entire sky with a scent that was both sweet and terrible. It was the smell of sacrifice, of love that pays an infinite price, of grace that costs everything. My knees, or whatever I had instead of knees in that state, buckled involuntarily. I fell prostrate before him, not out of obligation, but because it was the only possible response to being in the presence of absolute holiness. "Christopher," he said, and his voice was everything. It was thunder and whisper. It was authority and tenderness, judgment and mercy interwoven in every syllable. When he spoke my name, I felt every cell in my being, every thought I'd ever had, every second of my existence, resonate with that sound. It was as if my name had been created specifically to be spoken by him, as if my entire life had been waiting for this moment when he would say it. "Stand up," he commanded, and though it was a command, there was an invitation in it. I stood trembling not from cold, but from a mixture of reverent awe and overwhelming love that completely confused me. "You denied my existence," Christ said. And it wasn't a question, but a statement of fact. Instantly, without transition, I saw my life replay before me like a three-dimensional movie that completely surrounded me. I saw my childhood in your puraya. I saw my mother on her knees praying for me while I slept. I saw every taunt I had made in college, every atheistic argument I had arrogantly tossed out. I saw Roberto's face in the office when I had ridiculed him for praying. I saw the moment I had told my mother I didn't believe in God and the pain that caused her. But the worst part, the absolutely devastating thing, was that I didn't just see these moments from my perspective, I experienced them from the perspective of the people I had hurt. I felt my mother's pain as if it were my own. I felt Roberto's sadness when I had mocked him. Of her faith. I felt every tear Luciana had secretly shed as she prayed for me. It was like being pierced by 1,000 knives at once, each representing a moment I had rejected God's love expressed through others. "Every prayer your mother offered for you reached my throne," Christ continued. And now I could see something else. I saw heaven from another perspective. I saw angels carrying my mother's prayers like precious incense into God's presence. I saw how every Our Father she whispered in the early morning, every rosary she prayed through her tears, every plea for my salvation was recorded, valued, treasured. "Nothing is lost," he said. "Every tear is kept, every prayer is heard. And it is because of the prayers of your mother and your wife that you are here now, in this moment, with an opportunity not everyone receives." He showed me something that made me weep, even though I had no physical eyes to produce tears. I saw Luciana, my wife, whom I thought was a Christian. Lukewarm, not practicing. I saw her in moments I had never witnessed before. I saw her getting up at 3 a.m., when I was sound asleep after a long day at work, kneeling in the bathroom so I wouldn't hear her, weeping and praying. "Lord Jesus, don't let my husband die without knowing you. Do whatever it takes, break him if necessary. But save him, please, save him." I saw years of these secret prayers, hundreds of early mornings when she interceded for me while I snored, oblivious. The weight of that sacrificial love, that silent faithfulness, crushed me. How had I been so blind? How had I not seen the depth of her faith, the persistence of her love? "She loved you as I love you," Christ said, unconditionally. Despite your rejection, despite your mockery, despite your hardness of heart, that is the love that builds bridges between heaven and earth. Christopher, you built bridges of concrete and steel that would eventually collapse. She built a bridge of prayer that brought you here. Her words pierced me, each like a sharp sword cutting through all my arrogance, all my self-sufficiency, all my illusion that I was the architect of my own destiny. I had built nothing. Everything I thought I had achieved through my own merit was sustained by the prayers of people I had despised. Then he extended his right hand, the one bearing the nail mark, and touched my chest. Where his fingers touched me, I felt as if liquid fire flowed through me, but it wasn't a fire that destroyed, but rather one that revealed. Suddenly I could see my own heart, not the physical organ, but the center of my being, my soul, and it was black, stained, filled with pride, with rebellion, with sin accumulated over decades. I saw my arrogance like a cancerous tumor growing. I saw my lust, because although I was physically faithful to my wife, my mind had often wandered. I saw my greed, my love of money and status. I saw my hidden anger, my contempt for those I considered less intelligent than myself. I saw it all and wanted to cease to exist because the shame was unbearable. "This is the heart of every man without me," Christ said with infinite sadness in his voice. "Clean on the outside, corrupt on the inside. You thought you were good because you didn't kill, you didn't rob banks, you didn't commit visible crimes. But I see what is hidden. I see every thought, every motivation, every desire, and all, absolutely all men, are equally lost without me." Then he showed me something else. He showed me the cross not as a pretty religious image, not as a symbol of jewelry, but as what it truly was, a brutal instrument of torture and execution. I saw Christ nailed to that cross. I saw every lash that ripped across his back, every thorn that pierced his forehead, every nail that went through his hands and feet. But what truly shattered me was seeing for whom he was doing it. I saw my name written on that cross. I saw every one of my sins that he carried. I saw that he was dying specifically for Cristobal Mendoza Armyto, the arrogant atheist from Cook Bambber, Bolivia. "I died for you when you were still my enemy," he said, "when you still denied me, when you still mocked my name, when you still rejected my existence. I died for you then, waiting for this moment, waiting for your eyes to finally open." The weight of that truth completely broke me. I fell before him again, and this time I wept with a cry that came from the very depths of my being. "Forgive me," I managed to say between sobs. "I was a fool, I was blind, I was a proud idiot who thought he knew everything. Forgive me, Lord. Forgive me." He placed his hand upon my head. The same touch that had revealed my sin now filled me with something different. It was peace, but a peace that transcended any emotional tranquility. It was forgiveness, cleansing, renewal. I felt as if layers upon layers of spiritual filth were washed away from me. I saw my heart transform from black to white, from death to life. "You are forgiven," Christ said. "All your sins, past, present, and future, are covered by my blood. Now you are my son Christopher. Now you bear my name. Now you belong to my kingdom." The joy I felt at that moment was so intense that I thought my being would burst. It was more than happiness, it was fulfillment, it was purpose, it was finally feeling whole after a lifetime of being broken without knowing it. Then, he took me deeper into heaven. We walked, though I don't know if we were truly walking or simply moving of our own volition through that impossible landscape. He showed me things I'm not allowed to fully describe, things Paul mentioned seeing but wasn't permitted to speak of. I saw the river of life flowing from the throne, crystal clear water that shone with its own light. I saw the tree of life with its 12 kinds of fruits, one for each month. I saw the mansions Christ had promised to prepare, and each one was unique, designed specifically for the person who would inhabit it. I saw one that he told me was for my mother. I almost fainted with emotion at the thought that she would be here someday, that all her prayers, all her sacrifices, all her years of faithfulness would be rewarded with this. But then he took me to another place. The atmosphere changed. The heavenly music faded a little, and before us appeared something that made me recoil in awe. It was an enormous book, as big as a building, suspended in the air and shining with golden light. Its pages turned by themselves, moved by a wind I didn't feel, but which was clearly there. "This is the book of life," Christ said. "In it are written the names of all who belong to me, of all who have accepted my sacrifice, of all who will enter my eternal kingdom." The pages turned rapidly, and I could see names written in beautiful, brilliant calligraphy. Thousands of names, millions from all eras, from all countries, from all languages. "Look for your name, Popoli," he told me. With trembling hands, I approached the book. The pages stopped turning and opened to a specific section. I searched, anxiously scanning the names, and there, written in letters that shone brighter than the others, was Cristobal Mendoza Armyto, Bolivia, June 15, 2024. My name was in the Book of Life. I, who had denied God for decades, was now registered as his son for eternity. I wept again, this time with pure joy. "But not everyone is in this book," Christ said. And his voice was filled with such profound sadness that it made the sky itself seem to darken slightly. "And now I must show you something that will break your heart, but that you must see. Because I didn't bring you here just to save you, I brought you here to give you a message, a warning that you must take back to the world." His words confused me. I would return to Earth. But I didn't have time to ask because he stretched out his hand and the sky before us opened like a curtain being drawn back. And what I saw on the other side horrified me in a way that no fall, no accident, no physical death could ever horrify. I saw the earth, I saw my city, I saw my neighborhood. But what was happening in those streets was the most absolute chaos imaginable. And finally I understood why I was there. Why Christ had brought me into his presence. Because what he was showing me wasn't the past, it wasn't the present, it was the future, it was the day of the rapture of the church. And I would witness it from the perspective of heaven, before being sent back to warn those who still had time. To prepare. The sky before me transformed